In 2019, a banana was taped to the wall at one of the most prestigious art fairs in the world. It wasn't a special banana. It was the same banana you'd buy at a grocery store for less than $1, and it sold for $120,000. You read that right. $120,000. Now tell me, what was your first reaction? Did you laugh? Did you feel angry? Did you get that irritating sensation of, this makes absolutely no sense? Whatever you felt something. And that's exactly where the story begins. Because that banana wasn't just a banana. It was a question, a calculated provocation, a move that split the world in two and made both sides talk about it at the same time. It scandalized. Of course, it scandalized. But here we are, 7 years later, still talking about it. And today, I'm going to show you why that was no accident. Before talking about the banana, I need to tell you about the man who created it. Maurizio Cattelan was born in Padua, Italy in 1960. Son of a truck driver and a cleaning lady, he never attended an art school. He had no connections in the cultural world, no money, no name, nothing the art world considers essential for someone to be taken seriously. What he had was one thing only: an extraordinary ability to understand how people react. And with that, just that, he built one of the most bewildering careers in the history of contemporary art. But let's take it slow, because the banana story begins long before 2019. It begins in 1989 at his first solo exhibition in Bologna. You know what he did? He left the gallery completely empty. He placed a small handwritten sign on the door, "Be right back," and left. The gallery stayed empty for the entire exhibition. No artwork, no explanation, just that sign and the silence of a space that should have been full. People went there, looked at the white walls, looked at each other, and started asking, is this art? Is he provoking us? Or is he confessing something about himself? That question, that uncertainty left hanging in the air, is Catalan's signature. He doesn't create objects. He creates situations that force you to take a position. And when you take a position, you talk about it. When you talk about it, other people hear. And when other people hear, the artist's name travels on its own, without him needing to do anything at all. Do you understand the mechanism? We're talking about a man who never attended a single art class, who started his career making wooden furniture, and who today has work sold for millions at Sotheby's auctions, permanent exhibitions in Milan, retrospectives at the Guggenheim. Catalan understood before everyone else that the art world doesn't sell objects, it sells conversations. And the most expensive conversation in the market is the one that divides opinions. In 1999, 10 years after The Empty Gallery, he created one of the most disturbing works of the 20th century, a hyper-realistic wax sculpture of Pope John Paul II in full ceremonial vestments, knocked to the ground by a meteorite. When it was first exhibited, religious groups tried to destroy it. European parliamentarians demanded its removal. The Vatican issued public statements, and the work sold for more than 2 million euros. Think about that for a second. Every public statement against the work functioned as free advertising. Every manifestation of outrage led more people to want to see what was causing such scandal. The controversy didn't destroy the work. The controversy was the work. 2 years later, in 2001, Catlin returned with something that, for many people, crossed a line that shouldn't be crossed. A sculpture, child-sized, kneeling, with Adolf Hitler's face in a posture of prayer. The work is called Him. It was first exhibited in a synagogue in Warsaw, a space loaded with memory and pain. Some wept. Others stood in silence for a long time. None of those readings was wrong. And that's exactly what made the work last. When a work has only one possible interpretation, it ages quickly. When it has 10, it survives for decades. To understand Catalan, you need to understand Duchamp, because Catalan didn't invent strategic controversy. He inherited it. Marcel Duchamp was a French artist who, in the early 20th century, was at the center of everything most advanced in the art world. He painted, he thought. He moved among the greatest names in European modernism. And it was precisely for that reason that what he did in 1917 caused such damage. Duchamp walked into a store in New York, bought an ordinary urinal, turned it on its side, wrote the name Armut on one edge, and submitted it to an art exhibition in New York as if it were his own work. The work was called Fountain. The exhibition committee refused it, scandalized, incredulous, some furious. Duchamp then published a text defending the work, arguing that if an artist declares something as art and places it in an artistic context, the origin of the object no longer matters. What matters is the gaze, the intention. The original was destroyed, lost forever. What exists today are replicas authorized by Duchamp himself, copies of a urinal that never existed as an original work, and they are sold regularly for more than $1 million each. Let that sink in for a moment. Replicas of a urinal for more than $1 million each. But here is what I want you to see beyond the scandal. In 2004, a survey of 500 art experts elected Duchamp's Fountain as the most influential work of art of the 20th century. Not Picasso's Guernica, not Matisse, not Mondrian, not Kandinsky. A urinal turned on its side. Why? Because Duchamp did something no one had done before with such clarity and brutality. He separated the object from art. Before Duchamp, the question that defined a work was this made with sufficient skill? Technique was the criterion. Manual talent was the passport. After Duchamp, the question became another one entirely. Does this make you think? And that shift, silent but devastating, opened a crack in the art world through which every work that followed passed, including Catlin's Banana, including Damien Hirst's Shark, including Tracy Emin's Bed. All of these works exist because Duchamp signed a urinal and asked, "Who decides what art is?" That question was never answered. And that's precisely why it is worth millions. You've probably had a moment when you looked at something and thought, but anyone could do this. A colleague promoted with less competence than you, a mediocre product that became a phenomenon. A simple idea someone executed before you and got rich from. That feeling that lingers, half irritation, half fascination. That's exactly what Duchamp provokes to this day. And it's exactly what makes a work last 100 years. Duchamp wasn't naive. He wasn't simply picking up a urinal and expecting it to be revolutionary. He had been thinking about this for years, reading philosophy, quietly building a solid intellectual argument. The controversy was the surface. Underneath it were decades of reflection. This is what separates strategic provocation from empty scandal. Empty scandal shocks and disappears. Strategic provocation shocks and remains. Catalan read Duchamp, absorbed Duchamp, and then did what the best artists always do, didn't copy. He translated it into his own time, his own language, his own market. Duchamp asked, "What is art?" Catalan asked, "How much is a question worth?" It's 1991. London. A 26-year-old British artist walks into the studio of Charles Saatchi, the most powerful art collector in England at the time, and presents an idea. Not a painting, not a sculpture in the conventional sense. He wants to take a tiger shark, a real Dead shark, 13 feet long. Place it inside a giant glass tank filled with formaldehyde and exhibit that in a gallery. The name of the work would be The Physical Impossibility of Death in the Mind of Someone Living. Saatchi paid £50,000 for the artist to realize the project. The artist was called Damien Hirst. When the work was exhibited, the reaction was immediate and violent. Half the public found it sublime. The other half found it an affront. Critics wrote that it was the end of serious art. Others wrote that it was the beginning of something that didn't yet have a name. And then something no one had anticipated happened. The shark began to rot. The formaldehyde had not been applied correctly. The animal was deteriorating inside the tank. That specific work, that specific shark, was dying. Hearst replaced the shark, and then a question arose that still has no answer. If you replace the main element of a work of art, is it still the same work? It's like the ship of Theseus, that ancient Greek philosophical paradox that asks, if you replace each plank of a ship one by one until no original plank remains, is it still the same ship? The work that exists today at MoMA in New York contains no atom of the original shark, but it sold for $12 million. Someone bought an idea, a philosophical question, a title, and a glass tank with a new shark inside. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking the art world has lost touch with reality, that this is financial speculation disguised as culture, that there's something deeply wrong with a system that pays $12 million for a shark that isn't even the original. And maybe you're right. But here is what I want you to consider. You just spent the last 2 minutes thinking about Greek philosophy, about identity, about what makes a thing itself through time, all because of a shark in a tank. 8 years after Hearst and the shark, a British artist named Tracy Emin did something different, more intimate, more disturbing in a way that has nothing to do with grandeur. She took her own bed, the bed where she had been lying for days, unable to get up during a severe depressive crisis. The bed with the dirty sheets, the empty vodka bottles, the used contraceptives, the cigarettes, all the marks of a person falling apart inside. She took that bed exactly as it was and exhibited it as a work of art. It was called My Bed. The reaction was different from the other works we've discussed. Not just indignation, a different kind of discomfort, the discomfort of recognition. Because many people looked at that bed and thought of their own bed, their own period, their own time when they also couldn't get up. And then the question was no longer, is this art? The question became, is this me? When a work makes you ask questions about yourself, it has crossed a boundary that very few works ever cross. My Bed was nominated for the Turner Prize, sold in 2014 for £2.5 million, and is today in one of the most respected collections in the world. But what I want you to notice here isn't the price, it's the mechanism. Each of these works, Duchamp's urinal, Hirst's shark, Emin's bed, works because it finds the viewer in a place they didn't expect to be found. Art that finds the viewer in a vulnerable place needs no campaign. It travels. It travels because people need to talk about what caught them off guard, need to verify if others were caught in the same place. I need to go back to the banana because its story didn't end in 2019. In fact, it had barely begun. When Catalin taped that banana to the wall at Art Basel Miami Beach in December 2019, the 3 editions of the work were priced at $120,000 each. It seemed absurd. People laughed. Newspapers around the world published it with that ironic, incredulous tone. And then a performer named David DeTuna walked up to the work, pulled the banana off the wall, and ate it in front of everyone, smiling. Catalin wasn't angry. The gallerist wasn't angry because the work wasn't the banana. The work was the certificate of authenticity that came with each edition. A document with detailed instructions on how to buy a new banana and tape it to the wall following the artist's exact specifications. The buyer had not acquired a piece of fruit. They had acquired the right to ask the question. And in November 2024, that right went to auction at Sotheby's in New York. The hammer fell at $6.2 million. $6.2 million. For a banana that you yourself will buy at the market, taped to the wall with duct tape, and throw away when it rots. Now, and here I want you to stop for a second. I'm not here to convince you of anything. That's not my role today. What I genuinely want to know is what you think about this, not what you think you should think, not the answer that sounds more intelligent at a dinner party, what you genuinely feel when you hear that someone paid $6 million for a banana taped to a wall. Because the answers I've heard are the most varied possible. Some say it's the moral collapse of the art market, that it's money laundering with cultural varnish. Others say it's genius, that Catalin exposed the art market better than any critic ever managed, and did it from within, using the system's own rules against itself. And there are those who simply don't know, who feel both things at the same time, who find it funny and disturbing in the same breath. That third group is probably the most honest of all. Catalin grew up poor, son of workers in a country where social class defines destiny. He spent his entire life moving in a world, the world of contemporary art, simultaneously the most pretentious and the most expensive on the planet. A world where people pay fortunes for objects and then explain at length why those objects are worth what they're worth. And Catalin, with a banana and a roll of duct tape, made that entire world expose itself. He made buyers explain why they were purchasing a banana, made critics write serious articles about a piece of fruit, made journalists, curators, academics, all of them, involuntarily participate in the work. The banana wasn't on the gallery wall. The banana was in everybody's mouth. When Catalin's gold toilet, an 18-karat solid gold functional toilet installed in the Guggenheim in 2016 that any visitor could use, when that toilet was stolen during an exhibition in England, the police recovered it weeks later. The news of the theft generated more conversation about the work than any art review had ever generated. The scandal served the work once again. Down in the comments, tell me, do you think the banana is art? Would you pay $600 for it? 600,000? Do you think whoever paid 6 million was a genius or was deceived? There's no wrong answer. Only yours. In 1951, an American artist named Robert Rauschenberg did something that, on paper, sounds like the simplest thing in the world. He took blank canvases, completely blank. No brush strokes, no form, no color, no texture. Just the raw surface of the canvas stretched over the frame. And he exhibited them in a gallery as works of art. The reaction was exactly what you're imagining. Laughter, outrage. The collective sense that someone was playing a bad joke at the expense of those who had entered the gallery in good faith. But Rauschenberg had an argument most people didn't stop to hear. He said the canvases weren't empty, that they changed constantly. With the light coming through the window, with the shadows of people passing in front, that the work was the entire environment, not the object, that you, the viewer, were part of the work. Years later, a Frenchman named Yves Klein went further. Klein painted canvases in one single color, a specific, intense blue that he patented under the name International Klein Blue, and declared that that blue was a window to infinity. That staring at that uniform surface was a spiritual experience that needed nothing else. He then began selling zones of immaterial sensibility, not canvases, not objects, zones. The buyer received a certificate, paid in gold, and then, part of the ritual required by Klein himself, threw the certificate into the Seine River, and threw half the gold into the river too. Kept nothing. And that was the work. Klein and Rauschenberg weren't selling absence. They were asking how much of what we consider valuable actually exists in the object, and how much exists only in our heads. And if the answer is in our heads, what does that say about everything else we consider valuable? About money that is just paper with a promise printed on it? About luxury brands selling the same leather at radically different prices? The blank canvas isn't a joke about art. It's a mirror about value. And uncomfortable mirrors always generate a reaction. Always. Now let's go to 2007. Damien Hirst appears with something that leaves no doubt about what he is doing. He takes a real human skull from the 18th century and covers it completely with 8,601 diamonds. The central diamond is a flawless 52-carat solitaire, one of the largest ever polished in history. The work is called "For the Love of God," the phrase his mother said when she saw the project. The production cost was £14 million. The announced sale price was $100 million. And here is the part that critics didn't forgive. The buyer was an investment consortium, of which Hirst himself was part. He sold the work to himself, partially, and announced the sale at $100 million as if it were a normal market transaction. Critics called it self-promotion, manipulation, laundering of prestige. Hirst didn't defend himself much. He let the scandal do the work. And today, almost 20 years later, the diamond skull is one of the most recognizable images in contemporary art. Reproduced on T-shirts, magazine covers, tattoos, academic discussions about capitalism and mortality. The scandal didn't corrode the work. The scandal was the varnish that preserved it. Each one of them found a specific nerve of their time and created something that pressed that nerve with surgical precision. Duchamp pressed the arrogance of the artistic establishment. Klein pressed our relationship with the void and immaterial value. Hirst pressed the fear of death and the obscenity of wealth at the same time. Emin pressed the shame of vulnerability. And Catalin pressed all of it and laughed while doing it. There's a sculpture in Milan I need to tell you about before we reach the end. It has been there since 2010 in Piazza Affari, the square in front of the city's stock exchange. It's a marble hand, monumental, 36 feet tall, with all fingers amputated except one, the middle finger, pointing directly at the stock exchange. Catlin called it LOVE, love. When first installed, it was supposed to stay for just a few weeks. Financiers were furious. Politicians demanded its removal. There was public debate, institutional pressure, formal declarations of outrage. And the people of Milan went to the square, photographed it, shared it, laughed, reflected, and asked for it to stay. It stayed. 15 years later, the sculpture is a tourist landmark, a middle finger pointed at financial capitalism, which became permanent because financial capitalism couldn't remove it. There's an irony in that which Catlin certainly appreciates in silence. And this is where I want to pause for a moment. If you've made it this far into this video, I invite you to subscribe to the channel because the next conversations are going to be just as good as this one. Hit the button, turn on the bell, come with us. Now, back to what matters, because there's a question that's been left unanswered through this entire video, and I left it that way deliberately. Who decides what is art? You've heard different answers. The artist decides, the critic decides, the market decides, him decides. But I want to offer you another perspective. Maybe no one decides. Maybe art isn't a category with fixed borders, but a temporary state that some things reach when they find the right people at the right moment. Duchamp's urinal wasn't art when it was in the store. It became art, or stopped being art, depending on your view, when he signed it, turned it on its side, and placed it in a context that forced a question. Catlin's banana wasn't art when it was on the supermarket shelf. Tracy Emin's bed wasn't art when she was lying in it, unable to get up. It became art when she decided that vulnerability deserved public space, and maybe that's what all these works have in common. Not technique, not material, not price. The decision that something matters enough to be shown, and the courage or the audacity to show it, knowing that half the world will laugh and the other half will be outraged. Because here is what none of these artists ever did. None of them asked for permission. Duchamp didn't wait for the committee to approve. Catlin didn't wait for the critics to validate. Hearst didn't wait for the market to understand. They did it, exhibited it, and let the world decide what to do with it. And the world, that loud, contradictory, and sometimes completely irrational world, decided. Sometimes with contempt, sometimes with millions of dollars, but always with attention. And attention, in the end, is the scarcest currency that exists. scarcer than gold, scarcer than diamonds. Attention can't be bought, it's earned, with a question people can't answer alone, with an object that finds someone in a place they didn't expect to be found, with the courage to put something into the world and let the world make whatever noise it wants. You made it this far. And I don't know exactly what you're feeling right now. Maybe a slight restlessness. Maybe the sensation that something shifted inside your head, but you're not quite sure what. That's normal. The best questions do that. They don't arrive with answers. They arrive and rearrange the furniture. What I know is this. The next time you see something that seems too simple to be taken seriously, an idea, a project, a work, a person, you'll hesitate for a second before dismissing it. Just a second. But that second changes everything. Because the story we told today isn't only about art. It's about what happens when someone has the courage to ask a question the world isn't ready to answer, and waits with patience, with silence, with the quiet certainty of someone who knows that the right questions always find their time. That banana is still on the wall, and the world is still talking about it. Think about that. If this video made you think, share it with 5 people. Not because it's a magic number, but because good conversations deserve more people around the table. Leave your thoughts in the comments. It can be one word, a paragraph, just your honest opinion about everything we talked about today, and tell me, what subject do you want us to explore in the next video? I read everything. Until next time.